Hello, Spartans. My name is Dave Isbell, and I am the Assistant Director of Alumni Professional Enrichment in the MSU Alumni Association. It's my pleasure to welcome you to today's presentation, Global Marketability in an Age of Limitless Borders. Before I introduce you to our presenter, I want to point out to you the chat window on the left side of your screen. This is where you can type your questions, which we will be sure to answer by the end of the presentation. My assistant, Kara, is logged in as Helping Spartans. Go ahead and say hi, Kara. If you're having technical difficulties, please see the pod options at the top right corner of the chat box. From there, you can click on Start Chat with Hosts, and Kara will help you. For questions to the presenter, please be sure to use the Everyone tab at the bottom left of your screen. Also, all of our webinars are recorded and can be found at www.spartanshelpingspartans.com. The chat conversation will be saved to the recording, and all of the live hyperlinks throughout the chat and presentation will remain live. At the end of the webinar, we invite you to continue the conversation on Twitter. We are at Helping Spartans, and the hashtag for this discussion will be multilingual. For information about upcoming events, webinars, live streams, please visit us at alumni.msu.edu/lens. And now it's my honor to introduce you to Jason Teshuba, who is the CEO of Mango Languages, which is an online language learning software company that focuses on teaching foreign languages and cultures as well as English as a second language. Year after year, the company has grown over 100% and flourished in what many deem the worst economy since the Great Depression. After studying computer engineering at Michigan State University, Jason worked for Electronic Data Systems as a vehicle simulation software engineer. He developed software to run on GM and Daimler Chrysler vehicle simulators that saved his clients millions of dollars in annual expenses. Following a lifelong interest, Jason later founded an e-commerce language company in early 2004. Originally deemed a side business, Jason's Midas touch transformed the small company into an international operation by selling language educational programs to clients worldwide. He sold that part of the business to fund the creation of Mango Languages in 2007. From there, he transformed an original staff of 4 with $0 in revenue into a thriving office of over 52 employees and $6 million in sales in less than 4 years. A passionate student of language, Jason had always been frustrated by the deficiencies of the many language learning systems that he had used. Thus, he founded this new company with a very noble goal: to revolutionize the way people learn languages. His vision was to make learning a new language as fun and as easy as learning one's own native language. Mango Languages has 52 full-time employees at its headquarters in Farmington Hills, Michigan, and 150 employees worldwide. The company sells a product that helps people learn the elements of conversation in a new language, including vocabulary, grammar, pronunciation, and culture through a methodology called intuitive language construction. In continuing his own language journey, Jason is currently learning Latin and Russian and is conversationally proficient in Hebrew, Italian, Spanish, Greek, and Brazilian Portuguese. In addition, he has surveyed many other languages, including Mandarin Chinese, Cantonese Chinese, Hindi, Dutch, Armenian, Japanese, Thai, French, German, Polish, Romanian, Albanian, and Twi. In addition to his enthusiasm for language learning, Jason is also passionate about entrepreneurship and has molded Mango Languages' success through his enthusiasm for an entrepreneurial spirit and innovation. As 2 of the 6 driving core values of the company, entrepreneurial spirit and innovation encourage a culture of creativity and provide many opportunities for Mango employees to innovate and explore their own original ideas. Together, his 2 loves of language and entrepreneurship have led him to coin a term called linguapreneur, which is a word that encapsulates both of his passions and that drive the engine of his business. In 2011, Jason became a member of the EO Entrepreneur Organization, whose mission is to engage leading entrepreneurs to learn and grow. EO has more than 8,000 members worldwide, and it provides the opportunity to network with entrepreneurs from around the world. What's more, he also participates with many nonprofit organizations like Yad Ezra, a food pantry in Detroit where he is a board member. Between his deep interest for language and culture, his knowledge of helping small and startup organizations grow, as well as experience with nonprofits, Jason Teshuba is both enthusiastic and capable of helping the National Museum of Language prosper and promote a better understanding of language. And we are glad to have someone with that expertise with us today. We look forward to learning all we can from you, Jason. Thanks for being here.
Hi, thank you very much. And I think if that introduction made one thing clear, it's that I have a very serious case of ADD, and especially when it comes to languages, I have a trouble focusing because each one has a very unique quality, each language and each culture. But I'm very happy to be joining today. I'm thrilled to be speaking about a topic that's very near and dear to my heart and to my business, obviously. And I'm very happy to be speaking to fellow Michigan State University alum. I graduated many, many years ago, and I'm very happy to be speaking to my fellow Spartans. So, today, what we're going to be talking about is global marketability in an age of limitless borders. We will dispel the myths of multilingualism and multiculturalism. So let's go on. So this, obviously, we just had a little introduction. Language is very much like any other muscle, and if you don't use it, it'll atrophy. So some of my languages have gotten stronger, and Greek, for example, I was in Greece about 5 years ago. It was very strong, but I haven't used it as much as I would have liked to. So I think I'll have to plan a trip to Greece sometime in the near future to strengthen that language. One thing I'd like to do, since I'm actually speaking to everybody out of our studios at our headquarters in the Metro Detroit area, and there's 3 other mangoes with me in the studio, and since they're sitting behind me and I can feel them beaming over my back, I will introduce them real quick as well. So we have an intern who's also a Michigan State alum who just started with Mango this week. Her name is Yahang Zhang, and she's fluent in Mandarin, Chinese, English, and un poco español, a little Spanish. We have Irina Kulchitska, who speaks fluent Polish, Ukrainian, Russian, and English, and Antonio Casali, who speaks Italian and un peu le français, which is a little French, and he's fluent in English as well. So we're all here in the studio. It's not just me, but I guess I'm the one that's going to be speaking. So, moving along, let's talk about what is Mango. So, Mango, what we do is we create lovable language and culture learning experiences for all learners around the world. We have products that serve children, we have products that serve adults, and we have products now that serve learners of over 60 different foreign languages, and English is a foreign language as well. We've got over 1.1 million learners around the world, and we serve colleges and universities, not Michigan State University just yet, but many colleges and universities around the country, public libraries, corporations, schools, government agencies, and most recently we started expanding into a very unique market, which is the homeschool space, where lots of parents are taking a decision to educate their children at home, and Mango's been a very successful product, and we're growing into that space. And finally, individuals that find a need or a desire to learn a new language. So, by the way, in this picture, what you can see is you see an iPad and you see an iPhone. So one of our focuses is not only to provide language and culture, but we want to do it in a way that's accessible to people in this day and age. And we have a strong focus on building mobile technologies because we know that we all live on the go now, and we have to make sure that our products are there where you are when you're on the move. Okay, and we're also online, and we have some software-based products as well, but we want to be wherever you are. Okay, so let's get right into our theme now. This concept of limitless borders with 2 big exceptions. So we live in a world where there's essentially no borders anymore. Technology has brought the world closer together, and we have the ability to do business and even create friendships with people from anywhere in the world through the internet, email. We can exchange ideas at the speed of light. But in a sense, we have no borders. Even we can take a plane trip within a day to the farthest reaches of this earth. But there still are 2 main limits that we actually have, and it's becoming more apparent as the world is becoming smaller, and those 2 limitations are our own understanding of the language and culture of the people that we're doing business with or communicating with at the other end of the world. And we'll soon see that it may not even be at the other end of the world. It may be with the person sitting right next to us in our office. So let's address these two exceptions. A way to wrap our arms around it is to understand the myths of multiculturalism and multilingualism. And so I think one of the biggest myths, we're going to dive into each one of these shortly, but one of the biggest myths is that everybody speaks English. If that were the case, there'd be a whole industry that would collapse. In fact, Mango, a large part of our offerings are to teach English as a second language to people that have come to America, and also people in other countries. Businesses really need English language training. So it's definitely a myth that everybody speaks English. It just so happens that we encounter a lot of people when we travel to other countries that speak English, because those are the people that get the really good jobs in the tourism industry. But the reality is that this is not a widespread fact that everybody in the world speaks English. The second one is business is business. Well, business is business, but business in China is different from business in America. Business in Russia is different from business in America and in China. Business in India. And when we do business with these different countries, business is a little bit different business. And it's not all the same. So we have to at least explore this myth. The third myth is that US-based work is exempt from the idea that we have to be sensitive culturally and linguistically. Well, the reality is, in America, we have workers that are either from other countries or from different cultural backgrounds and different linguistic backgrounds that are working in our environment. And if we don't really understand where they're coming from culturally and linguistically, then we put ourselves at a disadvantage in working in the most effective way possible with really talented people that just may have a different cultural perspective than we do. And finally, if you realize that the first three are actually myths, then you might be caught up by the fourth myth, which we've seen a lot, is that, especially with adults, is the myth that I'm doomed. That, well, I don't know Chinese or I don't know Spanish and I really need it, but I'm doomed. I don't know how to learn it, or I can't learn it fast enough. And we'll explore that one as well. That is definitely a myth, and we believe that's a myth, and we know it's a myth because that's what our whole company, that's what Mango Languages is based on, is helping people to feel the exact opposite, that there is great hope that you can learn a language easily and efficiently and in a fun way, and really take your skill to the next level in a surprisingly short amount of time. So let's dive into these a little bit more. So myth number one, that everyone speaks English. It's just not true, and I touched on it a little bit already, but I'll say that in the terms of the number of native speakers in the world, English actually comes in third place. First place is Chinese, and second place is Spanish. Okay, so just right there alone, and as we know, in terms of emerging economies, China, Brazil, and then the Latin American countries, there's so much opportunity and there's so many speakers of, we didn't even mention Brazilian Portuguese, but that's one of the BRIC countries, Brazil, Russia, India, and China. We have to understand that there's an enormous world of opportunity that's out there in non-English speaking countries. And not everyone speaks English. So just raising our awareness to this is the first step. Let me go to the next slide here. Okay, so 65% of companies face language barriers that contribute to inefficiency, ineffective collaboration, and low productivity. Forbes came out with an article that was talking about some of the challenges that companies are facing, and this is a very alarming number. 65% of companies face language barriers. These types of inefficiencies and ineffective collaboration and low productivity, for the finance-minded folks out there, we all can immediately translate this into dollars. This is costing companies a lot of money. And for those of us that are investors in companies that have investments, it's very alarming, because language problems will ultimately lower the shareholder value for those of us that are invested in these multinational corporations. So let's go on. multilingualism is essential even when it doesn't seem like it. So what do we mean here? Professional success is all about relationships. Strong relationships are built on a shared understanding and respect of each other's backgrounds and cultures. So if you still encounter people that are all English speakers, you may be able to conduct business all in English, but the relationship you build will not be as strong. And probably the best way I could drive this idea home is there was a quote by Nelson Mandela, and I'm just going to read it directly from his own words. If you talk to a man in a language he understands, that goes to his head. If you speak to him in his language, that goes to his heart. I'm going to take a quick tangent from this presentation to talk about my own personal experience with it, and one of the reasons that I'm even in this field. Even if I'm not fluent in a language, if I can just say hello, how are you, thank you, in a language that's somebody else's language, and see the way that it makes them light up and glow, I feel like I've made a real true human connection and a real bond with another human being. I'm going to tell you an example. There's no business that I got out of this. There's no really financial gain whatsoever. I had a trip that I had to go to New York. I don't even remember the purpose. And I got in the cab and I asked the driver where he was from, and he said Afghanistan. And then I said, you must speak Pashto. And first of all, he was shocked that I had ever even heard that there was a language called Pashto. He said, yes, that's my language. And then I started to say a couple things to him in Pashto. He didn't see me. I was in the back seat of the cab, but I was actually opened up the Mango app, and I was clicking on the word for hello and how are you. And he was blown away. He almost slammed on the brakes and said, wow, man, where are you from? How do you know that? Because clearly I wasn't from Afghanistan. But just the bond that I was able to form with that person, of course, we didn't have a conversation. The conversation we had was all in English, but it just showed that I was willing to put myself out there and make a connection. And then when he dropped me off and the ride was over, I paid him and I thanked him in Pashto, which I still remember. I said Dera Manana, which is thank you very much. And I could see his eyes lit up, his face lit up, and those are the kinds of connections that can be very valuable if we did even apply them in a business situation, even when the people we're doing business with do speak English. It makes a very big difference. Okay, let's go on to myth number 2. Business is business. So what do we mean by this? If I understand business in the U.S., I can be successful anywhere working with people from any other culture. But that's simply not the case. So let's look at a couple examples. In South American countries, for example, it's customary to spend hours on personal conversation, just simply getting to know one another on a personal level before jumping into a business discussion. Well, Americans see business as more transactional, by and large. Now, one thing that's really important about culture, and I should have said this at the beginning, it's really almost impossible to generalize 100%, but this is more of an overarching theme of American business culture versus South American culture. You may find American companies that are much more personal, and you may find Latin American companies that may be much more transactional, but by and large, these are the general perceptions to be aware of. And then, of course, if you're doing business if an American company is doing business with a Latin American company, the most important thing is not only to understand Latin American business culture, but also to really try and get a sense of what the culture is like of that particular organization and the people in that organization. And you can't put a general blanket on everything, but for the sake of this presentation, we're going to take the most broadly accepted cultural concepts and discuss them. But I just have to put that caveat on there because I think it's very important. So Americans may jump right into business and just start talking about the transaction and the details and the negotiation. Now, if you pull that on a Latin American company, well, that may seem very cold, brash. It may seem like you're uninterested in the human beings that you're with, when it may not be the case, actually, right? The case may be that no, you may think you're respecting their time, getting right down to business. They're probably very busy. They have many other things to do, just like you do, right? But they may perceive you as cold-hearted and rude, and it may ultimately ruin your chances of doing business with them. Another interesting example is in France. it's customary to go around and greet every single person individually that's in your office each day. Well, an American may come in and have an American work custom of just going right to their desk and checking their email, settling in a little bit, reviewing their to-dos for the day and so forth. But that American in a French company, if they're on an assignment in France, may be perceived as unsocial, possibly even rude, just going to their desk and not walking around and greeting every single person. So these are just some examples of where not understanding the culture, you run the risk of making mistakes that are totally unintentional and may not even be accurate, but the way that it's perceived, that's a lot of what culture is about, is the way you're perceived through the lenses of another person's cultural perspective. And that's really the key that we have to drive in with. Business is not business. We have to understand how we may be perceived by the people we're doing business with. Okay, let's go on. Getting to know our global neighbors. So, limiting our knowledge of other cultures limits our abilities as professionals and the potential of our workforce. We have to get to know our neighbors to compete in a global economy. That sounds obvious, but your competitors, whether they're other companies or even there's job seekers or colleagues who are up for the same promotion as you, there's an advantage when you can understand and act upon the importance of learning other languages and cultures, especially when we're talking about a global company that has opportunity, or even a company that's not quite global yet but has opportunities in other cultures and other countries. The one who, even if they're not quite bilingual and bicultural yet, who expresses an interest and is showing active progress towards acquiring a new language and understanding a new culture, those are the ones that are going to make the most significant progress. Let's look at myth number 3. US-based work is exempt. So this, especially depending on where we live, it's going to be more prevalent. In certain major cities, we're going to be exposed to much greater culture. You know what? There might be a slide missing, actually. Oh, I must have skipped this one. L'Oreal. Okay. I'm sorry. I'm going back to this myth number 2. I actually missed this one, but I think it's an important one. So L'Oreal is an example of a huge and successful global brand. Their values promote multicultural employees, and they need to address the 5 challenges of this global brand. One is to maintain a global brand while remaining sensitive to local market differences. Okay. Number 2 is interpreting complex cultural information that is often difficult to just explain to people not part of that culture. This one's a very subtle one, but anybody who's been exposed to 2 different cultures really, I think, can understand this one. There's subtle nuances that's hard to just explain until you've been in the culture and been exposed to it for long enough. Number 3 is anticipating cultural conflicts within the organization itself when employing a global team. Number 4 is helping integrate new team members from different cultures. And number 5 is mediating relationships between global teams. So being multicultural means being more creative and more experiences and references to draw upon. So at L'Oreal, the multicultural employees stand out among the international workforce and help move the company forward in markets and with better internal communication and understanding. So those are the ones that they're promoting. Okay, let me go on to myth number 3 now. Sorry, I had to jump back there. So, actually, one example I just thought of about the previous one is, it's kind of like the most famous story about a global company trying to do business in a foreign country. But I don't know if anybody's heard of the Chevy Nova story. When Chevy wanted to take the Nova product, the Nova mark, to South America, it was a major disaster. And the reason is, when Nova in Spanish means doesn't go. So it says Chevy doesn't go. Well, clearly here it's just a Nova. It's kind of a Nova. But in South America, that doesn't sound so good. So a little bit of cultural and linguistic knowledge would have saved a lot of money in that example. Okay, so let's get on to myth number 3. Myth number 3 is that the U.S.-based work is exempt from a need for language and cultural knowledge and sophistication. So, obviously, L'Oreal is a global business. They do business around the world. But what if you only do business in the U.S.? Are you in the clear? Well, maybe not. So, let me go on. 1/3 of the corporations in the United States are owned or based abroad. Okay, so that's Northwestern University did a study on this. So that means that 1 out of every 3 major companies are owned or based abroad. So right there, it tells us that we have some benefit in many organizations to start being a little more sensitive to language and culture. And if we have limited language, there's limited potential, limited opportunity to only doing work in the U.S. and not potentially expanding to other opportunities that may become available. Diversity as a competitive advantage. So there's a lot of studies on this that having a more diverse workforce creates a more creative and innovative environment, and therefore it creates greater competitive advantage. So if everyone thinks the same, speaks the same, comes from the same background, there's not a lot to challenge and stimulate the culture as a whole. So it becomes more difficult to innovate. When we have a diverse workforce, it allows for more creativity, more problem solving, because there's people from different walks of life that have different lenses on the world that are able to challenge one another to see things a little bit differently. And we know that innovation and creativity comes from the ability to be challenged on your natural way of thinking. And that's one of the biggest advantages of having this more diverse workforce. And I can tell you from having a very diverse workforce here at Mango, it makes it a lot more fun. We do, and this may be unique to Mango, but I can say that we do culture days once a week, and we have cultural presentations, and really where we get the opportunity to learn about different employees and their cultural background, some of the customs, some of the things. They bring pictures in of some of the cultural events from their childhood, and it just gives such a much richer and deeper appreciation for the people that we work with, and I think it just enriches our culture in a very significant way, and I know that it does it for other ones. On a more practical standpoint, I can talk about one of the companies that we work with, a corporation. I don't think I'm at liberty to say their name, but they're a Fortune 500 company, and one of their problems was that they realized their customers, the number of customers that speak a language other than English in many different major cities was far outpacing the number of employees that they had to service them. And so they realized that they were going to start having problems. And in this particular company, one of their values was convenience and being able to connect with their customer. And so clearly, if they have a value of convenience and connecting with their customer and they can't communicate with that customer, that's a very big competitive disadvantage. And on the flip side, their competitors were facing the same challenges too. Now, if they could overcome it, clearly a more diverse workforce would really give them a competitive advantage in that example. Okay. So let's go on to myth number 4. Again, if we accept the other ones, but then that they're all myths, then what do we do when we realize, hey, I really should become multilingual, or at least start moving in that direction? I should learn about another culture and language, and I'm doomed. And I think we probably said it like that just for effect, but I don't know if anybody feels doomed, especially Americans, right? We have a sense that, at the end of the day, we can still fall back on English, so we go back into that first myth. But the reality is there's a lot that we can do about it. First of all, you're not alone. There's most of us, especially here in this country, I'm going to give you a couple statistics that you might find alarming in just one second. So 66% of the world's population is proficient in at least 2 languages. But Americans, only 17% of Americans are proficient in 2 languages. So if we look at that visually, if we're looking at 10 people or mangoes, 7 of them would be bilingual, and only 2 of those 7 would be Americans. So actually, I don't know if this was drawn up exactly the way I like, but this is the idea here is that in America we have some work to do to get on pace with the rest of the world in terms of our proficiency with another language. Okay, so how do we change this? So, well, that's one of the things that we do. We try and, when we service schools, we definitely try and give access on and off of campus, and that's why we do everything on mobile. We work with colleges and universities to provide language learning to more than just language majors. So a lot of times we work with the study abroad, career services, business schools, law libraries, and alumni associations, because all these different groups have a need for language, not just the language majors. I remember, actually, when I was at State, unfortunately, I did not get to go on I was in the engineering school originally, and a lot of engineering students had an opportunity to go study abroad in Germany. And I remember, and even some went to Japan. And but one of the biggest frustrations I heard when they came back was that they didn't really know the language. And while they didn't need it for their classroom studies, class was only a few hours of the day. Every other experience throughout the day happened in the real world in that country and happened in the language of that country. So, as I mentioned, we offer, I think, over 60 languages. We make it as accessible as possible by making everything available on mobile. And that's one of the ways we try and change the trend of Americans only having such a small percentage of our population being proficient in 2 languages. Okay, so one thing that's I want to say is when we serve the corporations, when we serve schools, when we serve libraries, we make it available to the people and families that are surrounding those environments. So, for example, with universities, we make it available to the alum. Of course, it's what we work out with the school. We make language and culture, our products, available to the alum. When we serve corporations, we typically make it available to all the families, because we realize if somebody especially is on relocation, it's not just the assignee that's affected, it's the entire family becomes affected. And we want to make sure that everybody has access to the product. And because it's online and because it's on mobile, it's very easy to give access to everyone. Okay, so basically, I'll sum it up by saying that in an age of limitless borders, becoming multilingual and multicultural is one of the best ways to take advantage of our global economy. You'll stand out in the job market, and you'll be able to have an even greater impact and compete in this global economy. So that's the bulk of my presentation. I might have a few ideas, but now I guess I'm open for questions, and we'll go from there.
Thanks, Jason. That was a really good presentation, really interesting. I am excited to take a look at Mango when you eventually come to MSU. I'm sure you will. But I have a couple questions, so while I'm chatting, go ahead and, if you guys have questions, go ahead and type them into the chat room. We'll get to them as they come up. So I'm just curious, you talked a little bit about kind of your culture at Mango, about how you integrate different cultural expectations.
Yeah.
Can you give a couple more examples of what it looks like there? Because I'm sure you guys have a lot of different kinds of people working for you. And I'm really curious about what the culture is like there and how you get everyone working together.
Okay, good question. I like the question. You want me to you want to ask something a little more specific, or you want me to just kind of take it from there?
Yeah, I'm just curious about just a couple of examples of things that you might do that kind of acculturates people to the business culture that's there.
Oh, to our business culture specifically. Yeah,
Yeah.
so the way we look at our business culture is we center it around our core values. You mentioned it in my intro, but so we have 6 core values. You mentioned 2 of them. You mentioned entrepreneurial spirit and innovation, but we have 4 other core values, and together those 6 really define the type of person that we look for in a mango. And then on top of that, they can have all that, but we want people that also bring an element of language and culture to contribute to the mix. So I'll just review real quickly those values, and then maybe that'll spur another question, which is fine. So quality is one of our core values, and the way we define that is strive for excellence in Kaizen. We want to really do our best to make excellent products, provide excellence in our customer service, everything that we do, and then we always know there's a way to get better. By the way, Kaizen is a Japanese term. You might have heard of it if anybody's studied any Toyota manufacturing principles, but it's a principle of continuous and never-ending improvement where literally they'll take a perfectly functioning line or piece of equipment and they'll run it to the point where it breaks, and then they'll figure out how to make it even better, and then they'll run it to the point where it breaks and they'll make it even better, and it's just this process of never-ending improvement. So that's quality. Innovation we talked about. We define it as think creatively to change the world, so it's not just little innovations, but we're really passionate about the idea that we can actually change the world with the work that we do. Entrepreneurial spirit you mentioned as well, taking risks and working hard to bring a worthy vision to life, and we believe in that. We have another core value. We call it fundiscipline. We made up a word. We figure if we're a language company, we're allowed to do such a thing, and it's the yin and the yang of fun and discipline. So we look at it as enjoying the journey to greatness. So we're looking when we look. How do you look for fundiscipline? We look for people that are really, really hard workers, that have the discipline to work hard, but also have fun in the process, and aren't the type that gets that can't enjoy themselves in the process of doing hard work. So we enjoy the journey to greatness. That's fundiscipline. And then integrity and positive attitude, which I always call the core of our core. People, we have to have those. And then like I said, the cultural and language component. Either people that come in with another background in another language or culture, or that have a really strong passion for it. Maybe they've traveled abroad, studied abroad, and so forth. So we start right in the recruiting process. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, but that we start right there.
Yeah, that's great. We got a couple questions in, but I want to get to those. But I just piggybacking off this while we're on the topic. So there's one particular thing I'm curious about. So in the States, self-promotion is widely necessary and it's a value for getting jobs or promotions. But as you know, there are cultures around the world where self-promotion is frowned upon.
Yeah.
So how does Mango, how do you recognize those people that are from those kind of cultures, and how do you move, because entrepreneurism, part of that is a little bit self-promotion. So how do you integrate people that kind of don't do that self-promotion piece? And what advice can you give to people that are from those cultures to be able to do it?
Well, that's a good question. I'm trying to think of some examples that we've had here, because I was just thinking of a concept that I learned about from South America, where the word ambition, I think it's a cognate in Spanish, but the connotation is quite different. Here in America, it has a very positive connotation. Oh, so-and-so is an ambitious person. But in South America, it has a negative connotation. It's almost like an aggressive type person. But in terms of self-promotion, I can't speak for other companies and other cultures, but we do our best to just look at results and not who's self-promoting and that kind of thing. But did I answer your question there, David?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's great. Thank you. Results speak for themselves. I
Right.
wish more companies would do that. Just focus on the results. But
Yeah.
there's a lot of hoops to jump through oftentimes. So that's great that you're looking at that and you're kind of looking at the numbers and recognizing people that way.
Yeah.
So we do have some questions in here, and I'm gonna massacre this name that's in front of me because I've never seen it before, and it's really original. But I'm sorry, Kiana? It's a beautiful name. Kiana, thank you. That's beautiful the way it's spelled. So she says, as a businesswoman, I would like to connect with women around the world. I don't know how to gain knowledge about cultural norms for women other than social media. Do you have any suggestions?
That's a great question. So, while I wish I had every answer to every question under the sun, um, I, I, I know that I don't, and I think clearly Irina must have known that I don't either. That's why she's sitting here making sure that she can jump in on questions such as this. I don't know if you heard the question, Irina. Did you? Okay, come to the microphone.
Yes, come.
Okay, say hi in
Hi,
Ukrainian.
everybody. Доброго дня.
Okay, so the question, and this is a perfect one for Irina because I think Irina's pretty up on this, so I'll just repeat it so she can hear it. I'm wearing headphones, by the way, so nobody's hearing the conversation outside of in the rest of the studio. But the question is this: as a businesswoman, Kiana's asking, as a businesswoman, she would like to connect with women around the world, and she doesn't know how to gain knowledge about cultural norms for women other than social media. Do you have any suggestions?
Sure. Wow, that's actually a really good question. And women leadership is something that's very, very dear to my heart. What I would recommend doing in this case, even though you might not find out all of the cultural differences and intricacies, there are a couple of women's organizations that I've sort of followed for the past couple of years, and some of them have professionals from various countries of the world. Some of these women actually from different countries would study in the United States and sharing the experiences. So if we have a way of perhaps sharing some of the notes, I can share the information. I don't remember some of the names right on top of my head, but I would be able to provide a couple of organizations that would be very helpful. I feel one trait that perhaps connects women around the world is desire to succeed, and I would say a lot of kindness, right, Jason? You would agree. So I feel like I think I like the quote, Jason, that you read earlier about if you speak to a person in another language, it goes to in their language, it goes to their heart. So just being able to connect on starting with kindness with those greetings, and some cultures are more ambitious. Some cultures are more people wait to be asked, wait to be promoted. So it's just really by finding out which ones you're exactly talking to and learning a little bit more about their norms. So my answer is probably a little bit general, but I can provide my contact information actually with this presentation, and I would be happy to answer the question in more details.
Yeah, and let me just thanks, Irina. One of the things I'd like to add to that too is that a lot of times, so even if you don't know the culture, I think, and Irina alluded to this, and I mentioned this in the story I told about when I was in the cab, but just if you know a little bit of the language, a hello, a how are you, that there's a universal language called smiling and laughing, and a simple greeting in the language, even if you don't have the perfect pronunciation, with a smile and a laugh, and then just humbly saying, I would love to learn more about how business is done in your country or in your culture, and then just let them talk, let them tell you, and they'll usually, and the nice thing about that actually is you're not going to necessarily get, they might think they're giving you a blanketed response. Oh, everybody in Argentina does business like this, but the reality is what they're telling you is how they think business is done, and the good points and the bad points, and what you can do to be really effective in that culture, especially with your particular business contact that you're talking with. So those are just a few suggestions. I hope they're helpful. If you want to ask a follow-up question on that, we'll be happy to answer it. And I see that Kiana gave her email here, so Irina, we can follow up with those organizations to her email, or David can. Great. Should we take another question, David?
Yeah, so we have Sylvia. She said earlier you talked about cultural differences. Not too long ago, Target's expansion into Canada failed miserably. In your opinion, was that due to cultural differences or simply bad business planning?
Well, let me ask you this: if you don't take cultural, if you don't take cultural uh, differences into consideration, is that bad business planning? So the way I guess the way I would answer this, and I'm not so familiar with this particular case, but what I could tell you is that any company that's expanding into another country, even the example I gave with Chevy and the Nova, if you don't take language and culture into consideration in a very serious way as part of your business planning process, then that is bad business planning. They're one and the same. And really to get some of those answers. Now, I don't know in terms of the Target example that she's asking a question about, I'm not exactly sure why. I'm sure there's professors at Michigan State University that have probably a much stronger opinion on it than I could muster. But I can tell you that I firmly believe that any multinational that's planning an expansion to another country have to take those two into consideration in a very serious way, and they need to invest in it financially, as well as putting the right people in place to address those concerns.
Thank you. So looks like someone's typing a question. I'm just going to lob one out here. It's kind of a left field question, and if you can't answer it, that's fine. But I'm curious about your ideas. What ideas might you have about kind of raising kids to be bicultural? You have any ideas about that?
Wait, I'm sorry, say it again. Ideas on how to raise kids bicultural?
Yeah, how do you raise kids biculturally?
So a lot of times my family asks me these questions, or they'll say something like, should I enroll my son or daughter in the Chinese program or the Spanish program? But the answer is very simple, actually. The best way, it depends which culture and what your purposes are, but the best way, which is probably the hardest way, is, and I see that I might be even addressing somebody else's question here, is to go to the country, to be there. Now, not everybody can do that. So some families have half their families in another country. Well, a summer trip every single year or every other year is one way. It all depends on the situation. I mean, another way is to, if it's that important to the family, is to move to a community that is much more culturally diverse. Because at the end of the day, you can read about it as much as you want in a book, but being surrounded by it is the most important part to really raising the bicultural children and families.
And that actually leads right to Al Moore's comments. I'm just going to read them to you, and you can respond how you like. So Al says there are a lot of cultural study book series that are viewed as base references for cultural background.
Right.
The caveat, of course, is that they generally have very little material from a feminine perspective. And then Al goes on to say, I think this discussion brings out the need for the U.S. to recognize that language needs to be mandated in the education curriculum. So Mango exists kind of outside of the education system, right? But you support the education system. So I'll just let you talk about whatever ideas that brings to you.
Yeah, I mean, so right now there are different school districts around the country that are starting to adopt this. I can tell you in our local area, and it was at the county level, but our county commissioner mandated, this was years ago, I think it was about 5 years ago now, he mandated that by 2016 that every high school graduate had to have 2 years of language, and that he also started a Mandarin Chinese program from kindergarten in our county. So, it's not widespread throughout the whole country yet, the way it should be and the way it needs to be, but there are pockets that are starting to adopt this frame of thinking. And I think what you mentioned about Mango being outside of the education system, well, sort of, yes. But the work that we do with schools and the work we do with universities and the work we're continuing to do as we innovate new products is very much in line with helping to best support what teachers do. We're a tool, we're a product to help, but we're not trying to we can't replace a teacher. A good teacher is a good teacher. There's no replacement for a good teacher. But what we want to do is make the teacher's job as easy as possible and to give the best tools and resources to the students so that the teacher can be freed up to do what they do best, which is to give that inspiration, the care, the unique attention that may be needed for the individual personalities and learning styles within the classroom. So so while we may be outside of the education system, we're also very much a part of it, and we're growing. As we grow as an organization, we have that as a very strong focus. I don't know, did I answer your question? I feel like I might have gone on a few different directions, but I want to make sure I answered what you were asking me.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to. I was just curious about your response about those ideas that Al gave us. But so I'm curious about how Mango works. So let's say I have this program. Can you give me like a 30-second commercial about how the thing actually works for someone that wants to use it to learn?
Yeah, I'm good at quite a few things in this world. The one thing I'm terrible at is giving a 30-second explanation about Mango, but I'll try my best. So the best way is really to do a demo. And probably Irina would be happy to set that up at another time. But that being said, I'll try and explain it real quick. Well, our focus is to teach conversational language, because we believe that the growth in the language and understanding of the culture comes through the conversations. So what we do is we teach. We start with a conversation, and it's a thematic conversation. Every single one of our chapters has a theme to it. Chapter 1, for example, of all of our courses is greetings, gratitudes, and goodbyes. We want to just teach you the basics. That's essentially the basics. Hello, how are you? My name is Jason. Nice to meet you. What's your name? And so forth. Just establishing a most basic foundational human connection in another language. And we teach you, we leverage the fact that you already are an adult and you've learned, you've mastered your first language, and then we leverage that to teach you meaning and all the grammar and everything around it. The best is to demo it, though. It's very simple and easy to use. I'll tell you this much: it'll feel like you're learning one word. But before you know it, you'll be able to put together and get creative in piecing together full sentences. And when I say creative, what I mean is you'll actually be able to form grammatically correct sentences that you never heard before, that you were never taught, but you were taught the structure and you were taught vocabulary, and as a result, you're able to piece together new thoughts and ideas. And you'll be able to do it, believe it or not, if we did a 10-minute presentation, I would be able to show you that in action. And you'd see it and experience it for yourself. That was more than 30 seconds, but that's the best I could do right now.
Oh, sure. So Trisha asked, what's the website address for Mango? Apparently she's interested in it.
Okay, I'll type it in here, but it's mangolanguages.com. I'll try and type it in here if it works. Let's see. mangolanguages.com. And then from there, we have different sub-pages for different markets. So if you're interested as an individual, you can go there. If you're interested, from the perspective of a corporation, you can look there. But that's our homepage address. And I just typed it in, by the way. Okay, she said she was on the site before. Any other questions?
So, so I have one question.
Yeah.
First, where were you 15 years ago when I was trying to learn Spanish? I am curious. So this is one thing that, as a second language learner, and I'm actually married to someone who is an English as a second language learner.
Okay.
There's a lot of fear when you first start learning the language, when you start using it. And I remember, it still happens. My Mexican family, my wife is from Mexico, they tease me so much about my accent and about how I mess up words, and I'm constantly stepping in stuff. And it kind of takes a little self-confidence. And now I know I'm like a part of the in crowd because they're picking on me, right? But what advice do you have for like when you're starting out new and you're saying, like I called my father-in-law some very bad names that I didn't realize were bad when I was teasing him, and I got some looks. Can you give some ideas about how you kind of get the confidence to use the stuff?
Well,
any ideas?
Yeah, this is a phenomenal question, and actually, that question believe it or not, is one of the things that separates Mango from pretty much every other language learning company out there, because we actually think about the answer to such questions. It's not just about mechanically learning the words and the grammar, but you're addressing a real problem with adult learners, and especially with American adult learners, is the fear, is the confidence, and there's actually quite a bit of research that shows that the best language learners are the ones that have a higher capacity to assume risk. And it makes a lot of sense. You're taking a risk. You're taking a social risk. You're uttering words. You know you may not. There's a little doubt. You may not be saying it quite right. You may be saying the wrong thing. We know in English, I'll give one example. You say, there's quite a number of examples. I was going to say the one that popped in my head was like the word beach, right? Well, a lot of people from other countries, they if they say the wrong word, or like a sheet of paper, right? So a small, tiny little micro change in the phonetics can alter the meaning entirely. And there's a lot of fear around that, and people laugh if you say the wrong thing or you make a small little incorrect pronunciation in a vowel and so forth. There's a lot of fear surrounding that. But I don't know how to tell you to get your confidence up other than what's going to happen. So you'll get a laugh. The truth is that depending on the culture, you do have to be a little careful. But with Mango, we give you the phonetic pronunciation. You can see it written out in English. You can hear the native speaker pronounce it. We try and eliminate as much of the possibility of saying the wrong thing. But it happens. It's impossible to avoid it. That's what happens. And I can tell you something. If you notice, when kids are acquiring their first language, little kids, they're always making mistakes. But what do we do with those mistakes? They're so cute. We pick them up. We kiss them on the cheek. We get them to say it again. It makes us feel good. We give them a candy, right? What happens when adults make the mistake? We laugh at them. We throw rocks at them. So we just have to I think the best solution to all this, to all the language learning problems we have, is to just remember you were once a kid and try and, in your mind, mentally go back to that state and act like a kid and have fun with it and don't worry so much about what other people think. But it's so much easier said than done. And I want to address actually one other thing about that, because somebody here asked about the difference between reading about culture in a book. Where is it? Here. Kiana wrote, in just considering how rapidly business norms have changed within the U.S. in a short amount of time, I don't think textbooks are the way to go. Is a best-case scenario traveling and immersing oneself in the day-to-day culture before trying to understand business culture norms. I'm tying this all together now because you can read about a culture in a textbook, but it's so vastly different than actually. You have to really become culturally attuned. You almost have to change your personality for that culture. Not exactly who you are as a person deep down, but the way you behave as a norm, you have to change. If you're in a culture that's very loud and boisterous, like an Italian culture, for example, you have to attune yourself. You have to be a little bit more assertive when you go into a shop. If we're Midwest Americans are used to waiting in line and people are pushing their way around and there's no lines being formed, you have to become a little more pushy or you'll be gobbled up by the culture. So my whole point in answering Kiana's question there is, I do believe that probably the best way to become culturally attuned is to actually be there and to be immersed in it. Why? Because you could read about it all day and you'll laugh and chuckle, but you're not going to feel the stress and pressure of, I just need to get my morning coffee and I've been here for 30 minutes and every single person pushed me out of the way because they don't have the respect to wait in line. They're not disrespectful. They just don't believe in a line. It doesn't exist in their culture. So anyway, I'm lost. I don't know where we started with this, but
I've been on mute, but I've been laughing almost
Oh,
this
okay,
whole
okay,
time this
okay,
answer
right.
because it was a great answer because and I can attest to it. So my wife is very sweet and kind-natured. First time I went to Mexico, she became a beast. She was a complete different person, and I was blown away because in that culture you have to exist differently. And it's so what you spoke was true to me. But so I love it. I mean, you gave a great answer in terms of like how do you get over the fear? Well, you have to do it. You have to remember that you're a kid in that language. You have to do it.
Yeah,
and,
it's kind of like that Nike. What is it? Just do it. Yep.
Just do it. Yep. And I can attest to just throwing yourself in and trying it. You're going to stumble around. You know, eventually it gets a little easier, and people actually start being helpful to you. I've noticed that people try to say to me, they try to speak slower when they notice. I mean, I'm like the only Caucasian in Mexico when I go, so everybody likes to try to test their English with me. And if I just start saying the hellos and the little things, it like what you said with your example, it really makes that connection between people, and it makes me stumbling around. It makes it easier and less embarrassing because people see that you're trying.
Yeah, and just in summary, I say you know when you said how your wife has to become a different person to exist appropriately in that culture differently. There's a great quote from Charlemagne. He said to have another language is to possess a second soul, and so in a way it's you know now you see it's true in a lot of not just as a nice saying, but it actually makes sense. Practically speaking. So,
yep, exactly. I'm much nicer in Spanish. I can't say as much.
Right, you just smile and nod.
Exactly. There's no political conversations because I don't know half the words. So
yeah.
So with that, I guess it doesn't seem like there's any other questions here. I want to give you just a couple seconds to wrap up, say any final closing thoughts, and then I will close this discussion out today.
Well, final closing thoughts are, I think it's very important to, even if it's not for business reasons, just for personal life enrichment, to learn another language. You know, no stress, just start learning about another culture that interests you. Everybody deep down wants to anyway, so just start doing it. And if you need some resources or help, feel free to visit us on mangolanguages.com. And I greatly enjoyed speaking to my fellow Spartans, and I'm very grateful that you invited me to give this talk today. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Jason. Thank you for being here and for the great information. And I look forward to taking a look at Mango, and I hope the rest of you who are watching this do. I wanted to remind you that you can find all of our webinars at SpartansHelpingSpartans.com. And we're always making professionally and personally enriching content and experiences for Spartans around the globe. We want to hear ideas about what it is that you want from us. So if you have an idea about a topic or a presenter that you'd like to hear from us, please shoot me an email. My email is isbald@msu.edu, and I'll let Kara put that up there. So we'd love to hear from you. This next coming week, if you are a teacher or you know any teachers, we have strategies for dealing with difficult students from a teacher. So that will be next Thursday, June 18th. That's our next webinar. So please join us for that, or let your friends know about it. You can find all of our webinars that are coming up at alumni.msu.edu/LENS for LENS. Thank you very much, and have a great day. Go Green.
Go Green. Thank you.